Good evening, viewers and listeners of Concerned Citizens Media. Thank you again for joining me. I will share some news update on Ukraine and also the situation in Addis Ababa University, plus other news update. So, the Addis Ababa University 6 kilo. The situation is very tense. I think it started a couple of days ago. So the situation is still very tense and very dangerous environment now. It's not a learning and a teaching environment. The security forces are also stationed there to control the situation. But according to the news coming out of Addis Ababa University, there are 2 students injured and taken to the hospital, and the students are in a terror right now, in a very dangerous situation. Some of them even talking to the media like they were indoor in their dormitory because of fear of danger. So the situation is very, very serious, and it started with the distribution of some papers by some unknown group, probably Amara students, supported by some political party from outside. This paper insulting, degrading Oromo students and the Oromo community in general. Also, claiming, characterizing Oromo's movement as an enemy of Ethiopia. So, because of this, the Oromo students demonstrated against it, against the administration, and against the Amara ethnicity, and also against slogans against the Minilik. So it's a very tense anyway, very bad situation, and the administration and the school faculty supposed to know what's happening in the university, and they're supposed to manage the environment, control the environment, so the student can learn and the teaching can continue. So it's a very very bad. Even some students are describing the faculties are joining those other groups against the Oromos. So this is not good. It should be controlled. It should be a learning, teaching environment. It should not be a place for bloodshed. So it should be controlled. That's the situation. And the administration, the faculty, the professors should have a dialogue about this, and they should discuss how to control it and bring the environment into safer for everyone. And the other one is Prosperity Party document, governing document for the next 4 years is out in public now. So please get it and read it. It got a lot of details, and download it, print it, and read it, because it can impact for Ethiopians for the next 4 years. That is their dream, and beyond that too. So it's already out. We got so many details, and the Prosperity Party is scheduled. It is first Congress, like a conference for 3 days, starting tomorrow from March 11 to March 13. So we don't know what they're going to talk about. We don't know if they are talking about creating peace, stability in Ethiopia. We don't know how they're going to stop the war and the situation with Oromo Liberation Army, TDF, Benishangul Gumuz National Liberation Front, and the other forces who are fighting the system. So, but they are, they're scheduled the first Congress or conference starting March 11 to March 13, and I hope they will come up with something like, how to create, love instead of hatred among Ethiopians, tension, something to reduce the tension, the ongoing war, and I don't think we expect something like that from Prosperity Party leadership. They are liars, they are, corrupt, and they just worry about the power. They don't care about the inflation. They don't care about all these other challenges, unemployment and global isolation. They don't care about this all. They care about controlling the means, controlling the police, controlling the military, the financial institution. Then they can do whatever they want to do for the next 4 years. So, but the document is out, and please have it, read it, print it, and keep it for record, and follow. We will follow what they are talking in the next 3 days. If they have something serious, I don't think it's anything serious. The country is upside down, and the government has no plan. The prime minister is talking like, childish, and telling the suffering people to eat some kind of weeds, and adding, boil it and just add salt and eat. That's the solution we have from this government. So that is the other thing, and and some foreign country also coming to Ethiopia to attend this upcoming Prosperity Party conference. This is a tweet from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Delegations of #South Sudan, #Djibouti, and #South Africa ruling parties have arrived in Addis Ababa today to attend the first Congress of the Prosperity Party, #PP, the governing party of Ethiopia. High-level government officials welcomed them upon arrival at OLA International Airport. So that is, the highlight of the Prosperity Party. So how to conduct their Congress, and we will see if they are serious about the country's problem. The inflation, people are suffering. People cannot buy even basic bread, and oil is expensive, and other materials are expensive, and high inflation. So we'll see what they're going to talk about. If something interesting, I will report to you. So the next one, I will come to OLA-OLF press release. There is a press release today on ongoing accusation against OLF and OLA. So before I come to this one and other news, let's see the update from Ukraine. And please don't watch this video with children, because it may be tough with them to see this mass grave.
City of Mariupol. The mayor says more than 1,200 people have been killed. There are no basic services. Aid groups are warning of a humanitarian catastrophe.
The only thing I want is for this to be finished. I don't know who's guilty, who's right, who started this. Damn them all, those people who started this.
3 more humanitarian corridors were expected to open on Thursday, according to the Ukrainian government. 35,000 people found safe passage on Wednesday, but thousands more remain trapped. Turkey hosted the highest level of talks between Russia and Ukraine since the invasion began. The foreign ministers of both countries met in the city of Antalya. Russia did not commit to a ceasefire or a humanitarian corridor in Mariupol.
Searching for a reliable used sedan? Shop the area's best selection of affordable cars at unbeatable prices. Want a vehicle with...
I did my best to at least find a diplomatic solution. We also raised the issue of a ceasefire, 24-hour ceasefire, to resolve the most pressing humanitarian issues. We did not make progress on this.
In the south of the country, soldiers fought in the street. In a suburb of the capital, Kyiv, journalists reported intense fighting overnight. The Ukrainian government says Russia continues to advance with the goal of surrounding the capital.
We don't want militarization of Ukraine. You can do it even without NATO. We don't want the preservation of the tendency to create a neo-Nazi state in Ukraine. Of course we want Ukraine to be neutral.
The UN has now verified that 516 civilians have died since Russia invaded Ukraine 2 weeks ago, but says the actual toll will be much higher. In Mariupol, more burials are expected. So far, 70 people, some who died of natural causes, have now been laid to rest. In this mass grave inside one of the small cities' cemeteries.
No proper burial.
Natasha Ganek, Al Jazeera.
Hundreds of people on the outskirts of Kyiv are trying to flee intense Russian shelling. People have been crossing a small river in the district of Irpin to head into the capital. The area has come under sporadic mortar fire in recent days, killing a number of people. Many plan to go to Kyiv's railway station to catch a train to the west of the country.
Many people live in basements, their houses, their apartments, and try to leave from Irpin, from Bucha. And this is the place where people are crossing the bridge, which is destroyed. And from here, the evacuation starts. Here, territorial defense works. I'm a member of territorial defense also. So we're helping people just to get to the cars, to buses, and to move.
Let's bring in Bart Shevchuk. He is visiting senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund, and he joins us via Zoom from Brussels. We just heard from Kamala Harris speaking about the US commitment to Ukraine and to Poland after it refused to receive and then deliver those Polish jets to Ukraine. My question for you is, what's your assessment of the American response to what's happening in Ukraine?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Look, you've seen an incredibly unified response within the whole NATO alliance, within the whole free world, in responding to Russia's aggression in Ukraine through, as pointed out, swift and severe sanctions that are going to inflict immense damage on Russia's economy. The theory is to inflict damage on the economy, to exert pressure on Putin to change its course. We've seen 25 NATO allies and partners announce or deliver military aid to Ukraine, and this is serious weaponry, from anti-tank weapons to anti-aircraft missiles, rifles, ammunition, and so forth. And we've also seen, and this is probably a little bit less visible to the public, but this alliance management, this response by the whole free world, it doesn't happen automatically. It takes a lot of behind-the-scenes effort and consultation and planning. And in fact, the latest episode over the fighter jets from Poland to Ukraine illustrates the importance of consultation and that behind-the-scenes private discussion and coordination. And what's probably surprising is that we haven't had more sort of incidents like this. And in fact, it's been an across-the-board unified response in a very complicated situation.
With all of that equipment that you're talking about there that's gone from Europe and from the US to Ukraine, How matched or otherwise are Russia's and Ukraine's military on the ground and also in the air?
Well, the assumption before February 24th was that it would take anywhere between 24 to 72 hours for Ukrainian defense forces to fold against Russia's technologically advanced military. But in fact, the Ukrainian army has proven that it has the will to fight, it has the resolve and the ability to do so. And not only the defense forces, but of course you've seen these territorial defense forces, civilians, volunteers, and across the Ukrainian population, a unified response and commitment to resist. Now, the weaponry that's being delivered to Ukraine is important because President Zelensky has declared that they will fight, they will not surrender, they will fight until Russia backs down, but they need the tools to do so. And in fact, the West and the free world writ large has become the arsenal of Ukraine's democracy and resistance, just as America during World War II was the arsenal of democracy in helping the UK and other European allies resist Nazi aggression.
All right, thank you very much for your time. Bob Shevchuk there, visiting Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund.
Thank you very much.
Russia and Ukraine have collectively long been referred to as the breadbasket of Europe. Together they account for 30% of global wheat exports. But the war in Ukraine is pushing up the price of grain around the world, especially in heavily dependent regions like Africa and the Middle East. The United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization says Egypt imports around 85% of its wheat from the two warring sides. Lebanon gets 81% of its wheat from Ukraine. Other countries like Iran, Libya, and Turkey are also heavily reliant. Food shortages could affect the lives of millions of people, particularly in developing countries. Steep price increases in basic necessities like bread, milk, and meat can also produce food insecurity, famine, and civil unrest.
Patients who need plasma are reaching out. Give plasma and get reward.
Let's bring in Abdulreza Abbasian. He is a food market expert and former senior economist at FAO and former G20 Agricultural Market Information System Secretary. Whew, that's a mouthful. He joins us via Zoom from Rome. Thank you for your time. What's your assessment of what this is going to mean for those countries whose populations already face food insecurity?
Unfortunately, it's going to be more difficult. The prices have been going up for basically all basic foodstuffs at least for a year, well before the current war. The war is just exacerbating the pressure on prices to go up further because people naturally expect that there will be a shortfall in availabilities in the world market, and this will already seen in prices. Wheat, for example, which is so important for Middle Eastern, North African markets, have gained something like 40% just recently. I mean, this type of increase in such a speed has taken everybody by surprise, and I'm afraid that many countries around the world are not prepared for that.
And I was reading that some countries traditionally have consumed a lot of wheat because wheat has been cheaper than protein. So what do you think this is going to mean for people's health? I mean, longer term?
Well, again, going back to the COVID period, which still is with us, by the way, people seem to forget that, we already have seen a huge increase in the number of hungry and as well as huge increase in malnourishment. That means you're not getting the kind of quality food that you need. This predates the war. Now, with these prices, I'm just afraid that not even bread may become affordable in many places in the world. Just minutes ago in the US, they came up with the latest inflation level. It's a striking 7.9% year on year, fastest increase in 40 years. And we're talking here about highly developed country, United States. So you could just imagine the pressure right now in many parts of the world when it comes to inflation. And inflation is not just food, it's energy, it's everything. So this is also the other thing that we have to really contemplate on. You're not talking about food in isolation. Look at the fertilizer market, look at the energy market. All these things come together. So the pressure on especially the most vulnerable, I do not think has been greater than this since the Second World War.
Are there alternative sources? I know you were saying that it's not just about wheat, it has flow-on effects everywhere. But I guess my question is this price increase caused by a shortage able to be easily circumvented by planting more elsewhere? Or like, how long does it take to make up for that loss?
I'm glad you asked this question because it's very important. If you look at the short-term period, let's say between now and the next big harvest in the Northern Hemisphere, talking about grains, as a matter of fact, we shouldn't be so worried about the shortage. Ukraine and Russia have already exported the bulk of what they would have exported in the current marketing season, known as 2020-21. There is probably like 8, 9, 10 million ton left to be exported before the next harvest. And I don't think that the rest of the world, other major exporters, will not be able to make up for that. Unfortunately, though, the market doesn't look at this. It doesn't look at what is happening the next 2-3 months. It's looking beyond. It's worried about plantings, the spring plantings for next year. It's worried about whether the fact in these countries, especially in Ukraine, I would say, there will be an orderly harvesting that will take place, and that next year Ukraine will be able to export or not, or how much of Russian wheat will make it to the world market. This anticipation of next year, next season, I would rather say, which is 2020-23 season, next season not having as much as even this year is what is fueling the price increase. It's inevitable. We're all humans. We're all worried about the future. What do? We go and buy now. We try to buy now, and there is a bit of a speculation there, which is also fueling. So I'm very worried about this because the prospects do not look good. But if we want to be realistic, we have to accept the fact that today, as we speak, we do not have a shortage. What we have is lots of fear, and that fear is the one that drives up prices.
All right, hey, thank you very much for your time there, Abdul Reza Abbasian, food market expert.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one more video. I will bring it at the end. So that's the update on Ukraine, and the deaths and the destruction continue, and it is impact on the global economy and food supply, energy supply, and other matters. Continue. It could impact us in the developed world, plus those African countries who are dependent on Russian and the Ukraine supplies. So let's continue. Thank you again for joining me. So this is a press release by OLF regarding continued accusation of atrocities against the OLA-OLF. So if you remember, OLA repeatedly releases press statement concerning media accusations. So many accusations. OLF did this, OLF did this, repeatedly by different media controlled by other groups, including the government of Ethiopia. So OLA invited the international community to independently investigate these accusations. So far, nobody appeared to do that, and his calls didn't get attention, the global attention from US, from European Union, or from Human Rights Commission. Nobody paid attention. So this is another call again, and this is another press release on the accusation, on this repeated accusation, and Oromos are dying, and Oromos are being accused again for atrocities. Oromos' houses are burned while they are inside, but they are being accused by media, by other groups, as the attackers. Let's read what it says. Regarding continued accusation of atrocities against the OLA, press release. The sedimented Oromophobia from political, cultural, and religious establishment of the Ethiopian Empire has continued unabated. As always, the Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Liberation Army, OLF, OLA condemned in the strongest possible terms all alleged killings of civilians anywhere, including in the Oromia region. Despite the repeated bordering on perpetual misinformation and malign propaganda campaigns by the genocidal Abiy regime and its neo-Neftenya allies, the Oromo Liberation Army, OLA, has always been committed to its perennial objective of liberating the Oromo people from national oppression under the Ethiopian Empire. Our army fights with systems of oppression, not with individuals, much less defenseless innocent civilians. As a political party and a liberation army with a singular objective of sustainably relieving the Oromo people from their suffering under successive repressive regimes, there is no political or military objective, none whatsoever, that our army would generate by targeting innocent civilians. In reality, short of putting ourselves in the affairs of others and imposing our will as the neo-Neftenya elites in the country would wish to do, we emphasize with vulnerable communities everywhere, including innocent non-Oromo civilians who call Oromia home and go all the way to aiding their quest for liberty and dignified existence. For any close observer of the recent Ethiopian political life, it is easy to see that the Abiy regime and his neo-Neftenya patrons have been using the Oromo Liberation Army as a scapegoat for any atrocities, crimes that they commit against our people. They kill the Oromo and blame the Oromo for their deaths. If recent memory serves us well, the original accusations by the regime for the Karayu massacre of our Gada leaders, the two of which escaped between the regime's fingers in a matter of weeks, is the epitome of scapegoating the victim. It is a twisted version of Machiavellism that has been normalized in Ethiopia. Independently verifying what happens in Oromia through credible third persons is virtually impossible. In an attempt to prevent the international community from finding out the atrocity crimes that it commits in Oromia, the PP, Prosperity Party, has blocked the regime from the rest of the world for 3 years, barring a few intermittent occasions when phone lines and some internet connectivity is impossible. Abiy keeps the regime in the dark precisely to conceal his crimes, and despite the deafening silence, the world also knows it. As always, OLA urges the conduct of an independent investigation into all alleged atrocity crimes committed in Oromia and making sure that those responsible are held to account. We also remind the international community to put pressure on the regime to open up Oromia to international media. If the regime is not culpable as it claims, there is no reason to seal the regime from independent media. As we have repeatedly indicated in our prior press releases, the Prosperity Party has been on a mass killing spree in Oromia for 3 years. However, the news of such crimes only occasionally comes to light, only when the regime wishes to accuse OLA. In fact, the regime made concealing anything that happens in the region its primary job. In this regard, it helps to remember the leaked internal letter that the regime's media authority wrote in November to its US-based mouthpiece, Assad, not to report on anything coming out of the Oromia region where the OLA operates, except when there are accusations against our forces. The only anomaly to this rather consistent modus operandi is that the regime decided to make recent massacres of civilians in Oromia a matter of public debate. Why did the regime therefore make this recent massacre public? It did so because Abiy and his neo-Naftanya cronies benefit politically in at least the following ways. 1. As we indicated before, the genocidal regime has a declared policy of punishing entire populations for their political views. By accusing OLA of its own atrocities in public, Abiy is renewing his justification for yet another round of genocide on our people in the region in the name of OLA. Second, Abiy is losing a firm grip on his extremist Amhara allies, both inside and outside the PP. To shorten the leash on the expansionists, he has to demonstrate, sadly, using the blood of innocent people, that they are vulnerable in the Oromia region, and only he can do something about it. He accomplished this without even identifying the ethnic background of the victims. He only has to put civilian massacre and OLA in the same sentence to have the Amhara extremists infer the ethnic background of the victims and go haywire into his trap. Third, a decision has been made to purge a faction in the OPDO branch of the PP. Following the current news, accusations that the governing Oromia PP is unable repeatedly to protect civilians in the region will give Abiy the needed political upper hand to eliminate this dying clique. 4. Some government-associated neo-Naftanya political parties have also recently ratcheted up accusations against the OLA. They do so in the desperate attempt to reconnect with the constituency they have long lost because of their unholy association with the Abiy regime. Finally, we reiterate our call for any credible independent investigation into the allegation and for perpetrators to be held accountable, serve justice to the victims, and adequate compensation for their families. To support independent investigations, the OLA will also begin releasing a compiled video audio, and other evidence that attest to our claims that the PP sponsors civilian atrocities in Oromia. So that is very strong press release from OLA-OLF High Command, and is calling again and again for independent investigation instead of just general accusation by media, by Amara ethnic groups, and by the media controlled by them, plus the Abiy Ahmed government. So accusation should be verified by independent investigation, but the Ethiopian government don't want any investigation, and they will shut down internet and phone service whenever they do atrocities against the Oromo people, and they blame Oromos again. So that's a press release. It says, "May justice always prevail, victory to the Oromo and all oppressed people. OLF, OLA High Command, March 5, 2022. So that is the reality. We need independent investigation by international community to clarify, to find out the truth. And so this is about measles case. Over 900 measles cases reported across 3 regions in Ethiopia, United Nations said. About 929 new measles cases have been reported across 3 regions in Ethiopia, namely Somali, Oromia, and Southern Nationalities and Peoples, SNNP region. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said Tuesday. In the latest situation update, the office believed that as March 3, the Dolado and Bokolmayo district of the Liban zone in the Somali region had registered about 700 new cases and 12 deaths since December 2021. The measles outbreak affected 15 localities, including 5 refugee camps in the zone. It's not. According to the United Nations Humanitarian Office, the Regional Health Bureau and the World Health Organization, WHO, are considering a measles vaccination campaign targeting children from 6 months to 10 years in all districts of Liban zone and 2 neighboring districts in Afder by the second week of March. Active monitoring and surveillance are also said to be carried out in other locations in the region with the suspected cases. Meanwhile, as of February 25, 104 cases were lodged in the Borena zone in the Oromia region and the Gamo zone in the SNNP region, registered 125 cases, the United Nations Office added. Last April, the WHO warned that several African countries could experience an outbreak of measles amid stalled vaccination against the viral disease due to disruption linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's a very serious situation. Too many trouble in Ethiopia. Hunger, drought, measles, civil unrest, war, hate among each other, inflation, international isolation. Too many problems under Abiy Ahmed. Too many. That's why concerned citizens media repeatedly call upon him to give way for others to emerge as real leaders. But he refused. He said he will continue the next 4 years. We don't know. Maybe he will leave after 4 years. We don't know. No guarantee. As a president, as a prime minister, we don't know. But the country is collapsing. The country is collapsing. Really, people are suffering. So So credits for this one, africanleader.com. Ethiopia affirmed neutral stance of Russia-Ukraine war, says G4 nation promotes regional integration. This is from Dina Mufti, Ambassador Dina Mufti press briefing. At today's bi-weekly press briefing of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA, the spokesperson, Ambassador Dina Mufti, said Ethiopia is watching the dispute between Russia and the Ukraine carefully. It's not a dispute, it's a war. It's an invasion. He asserted that Ethiopia will remain neutral regarding the two countries' internal affairs. It's an invasion. So he also commented on the recently formed group of 4 nations comprising Algeria, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and South Africa, aimed at dealing with various issues confronting Africa. G4 is an interest-based relationship aimed at development, and it will not operate against Africa's regional integration program, the ambassador says. So Ethiopia is forming G4, so like a NATO or maybe like European Union. We don't know why they need this. They have African Union, they have IGAD, so now they are forming another G4, which include Nigeria, Ethiopia, South Africa, and Algeria. The spokesperson explained that Ethiopia embassies based in England, Italy, Germany were under effort to evacuate Ethiopian citizens in Ukraine. He, however, said that he didn't have the exact figure of Ethiopians that were residing in Ukraine where war is raging on. Too late. The war is almost 15 days. Look, India, they already, evacuated their citizens. Some African countries also did, but when it comes to Ethiopian citizens, no value at all. 15 days, the war is waging. You see it on the media, on the video. Bombardment. They are now studying to evacuate Ethiopians. They don't care. It's the same thing like Ethiopians suffering in Saudi Arabia. We don't have the government in Ethiopia, really. Replying to Addis Standard question regarding the purpose of the formation of the group of 4 nations, G4, and if it has any impact on Africa's scheme of regional integration, the ambassador explained that the idea of G4 was not a new concept, and it had been operating in many aspects with NEPAD previously. Never heard of that. G4 is an interest-based relationship aimed at the development, and it will not operate against Africa's regional integration program, while G4 is just an interest-based relationship. Other African regional blocs like IGAD, ECOWAS, and SADC are institutional, the spokesperson said. At the beginning of February, it was reported that the leaders of the 4 countries, Algeria, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and South Africa, announced the formation of the group of 4 nations, G4, on the sideline of the 6th EU-AU summit at Belarus. Despite the lack of details, the report indicated that the purpose of forming this group was aimed at addressing crisis area in the continent. On the other hand, Ambassador Dina discussed the decision of the appointment of 3 members of the International Commission of Human Rights expert by the UN Human Rights Council on Ethiopia to conduct an impartial investigation into allegations of violations and abuses of human rights concerning the ongoing conflict in the northern part of Ethiopia. At the presser, he was asked if the Ethiopian government had any stance on this decision. He said the Ethiopian government has not taken any stance on it yet. It is to be recalled that earlier in March, the president of the Human Rights Council, Ambassador Federico Villegas, Argentina, announced the appointment of Fatou Bensouda of the Gambia, Kerry Betty Murongo, Kenya, and Stephen Ratner of the US to serve as the 3 members of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. Mrs. Bensouda will serve as chair of the 3-person commission. I also reported on this one last time. Furthermore, Ambassador Dina talked about the relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea, explaining to a question from the media if the relationship between the 2 countries was based on principle and at an institutional level. He stated that the 2 countries had been in conflict for years, and it has almost been 3 years since they reconciled and regained their peace. Despite ongoing conflict impacting the newly emerged relationship of the 2 countries, the biggest success of Ethiopia and Eritrea is their achievement of maintaining regional peace, he said. Before winding up the briefing, the spokesperson talked about the current relationship between Ethiopia and the United States, saying both countries want to strengthen their bilateral relationship. So that is a bi-weekly briefing by Ambassador Dina Mufti on the relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea, Ethiopia and the US, and the formation of G4 and Ethiopia's stance on Russia invasion of Ukraine. This is Putin. President Putin says Russia will emerge stronger. Sanction will rebound on West. That's a defense from Vladimir Putin. President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that sanctions imposed against Russia would rebound against the West, including in the form of higher food and energy prices, and Moscow would solve its problem and emerge stronger. Putin said there had been no alternative to what Russia calls its special military operation in Ukraine, and that Russia was not a country which could accept compromising its sovereignty for some sort of short-term economic. Excuse me, the battery is getting low. Apologies. So my apologies. The broadcast was disconnected because of power failure on my computer. So I apologize that one. I almost done. Just a couple of points to mention. So let's continue. The sanctions would have been imposed in any case, Putin told a meeting of the Russian government. There are some questions, problems, and difficulties, but in the past we have overcome them, and we will overcome them now. In the end, this will all lead to an increase in our independence, self-sufficiency, and our sovereignty, he told a televised government meeting 2 weeks after the Russian forces invaded neighboring Ukraine. Putin said Moscow, a major energy producer that supplies a third of Europe's gas, would continue to meet its contractual obligations even though it has been slammed with comprehensive sanctions, including a ban on U.S. purchase of its oil. They announced that they are closing the import of Russian oil to the American market. Prices there are high. Inflation is unprecedentedly high, has reached historic highs. They are trying to blame the results of their own mistakes on us, he said. We have absolutely nothing to do with it. Hitting back against the West, the Russian government said earlier it had banned exports of telecom, medical, auto, agricultural, electrical, and tech equipment, among other items, until the end of 2022. In total, over 200 items were included on the export suspension list, which also covered railway, cars, containers, turbines, and other goods. So he is retaliating. He is doing his part and being defiant instead of stopping the invasion and ending the bombardment of Ukraine. So that is his response. The country is burning, really, even though money is coming, weapons is coming, human resources is coming, but they couldn't stop the war. So Ukraine is burning. This is also from Russia. Russia may freeze assets of foreign companies leaving its market. Moscow, Russia. Assets of foreign companies that are suspending or terminating their service in Russia may be frozen and the property rights restricted. Andrei Klesha, the chairman of the Russian Upper Chamber's Committee on Constitutional Legislation, told Sputnik on Thursday, in relation to foreign companies from unfriendly countries that are leaving Russia, not only can such measure as nationalization be applied, but also restriction of property rights, a ban on voting by stock shares in subsidiaries, freezing of assets, and other measures, Klesha said. After Russia launched its military operation in Ukraine, many international businesses began to leave Russia market, with over 3 dozen international companies declaring a downsizing or suspension their operation in the country, including major air and auto manufacturers, big tech and energy companies. So yeah, many companies are leaving. Many. Shell, McDonald's, and other companies are leaving Russia. It might be by marketing situation or supply and demand issue, or it might be a pressure coming from these European countries or from the United States. So that's the response. Now they want to confiscate their property and restrict their finances and restrict their voting right as a shareholder. So that's the last for reading. I have a very short video, and that will be the end for today. This is a video on Sudan and South Sudan conflict.
Dozens of people have been killed in an outbreak of intercommunal violence in a disputed oil region in South Sudan. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said on Wednesday that fighting in the oil-rich border region of Abyei, disputed between Sudan and South Sudan, left at least 36 people dead as of March 6 and an unknown number injured, with 50,000 displaced. Fighting in the area, which began on February 10, intensified in early March, according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA. Abyei's Chief Administrator's Office says the situation is now under control thanks to the concerted efforts between the South Sudanese government and the United Nations Interim Security Force for Abyei, UNISFA. Abyei, caught between Sudan and fledgling South Sudan, has been a flashpoint between the two countries since the South gained independence in July 2011. It has since then been placed under UN protection. The UN interim force deployed there has also called for an end to the violence. The US embassies in Juba and Khartoum issued a statement expressing their grave concern over the escalating violence in the region. South Sudan separated from its northern neighbor in 2011 for a 22-year civil war.
Okay. So that's also a troubled region. South Sudan got its independence from Sudan. After you got independent, you're supposed to live in a much better situation, but the conflict never ends. The conflict between different tribes plus with Sudan, so sometimes getting your independence doesn't make sense if you don't live in peace and prosperity, if you don't lead your country in a peaceful manner. If the conflict continue within and with on the border, that's a trouble trend, really. So that's the update I have for today, but I'm still concerned the situation in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa University. I hope the administration, the school faculty, professors will have a serious discussion to stop this bloodshed and this confrontation and terrorizing students, our future generation. So they have to have some kind of mechanism to stop, students from provoking each other and bringing some historical stuff to create conflict, terror in the campus. So we follow it. I hope it will stop, and I hope the environment will restore. So these external forces also must stop from bringing their issue into the campus. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for joining me. I will be back with other updates. Be safe and so long.